The top two overall seeds in the NCAA tournament lose on Friday night, and for the first time in modern NCAA tournament history, 0 number one seeds advance to the Elite Eight. What is happening? It's just March Madness.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily year-round national college hoop show. I am your host, Andy Patton, joined by fellow host Isaac Shade.
What up?
And today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Isaac, the results, like the actual games, maybe weren't as exciting on Friday as we saw on Thursday. It would have been very difficult to stop that Kansas State, Michigan State game, and of course that Gonzaga UCLA game, two absolutely epic games. But instead of heartbreaking games that come down to the final seconds, we just saw both of the number one seeds that are remaining get eliminated back to back in like a half an hour or an hour span of time. Alabama goes down to San Diego State. Houston goes down to Miami. And we have an Elite Eight that features 0-1 seeds. The first time that has ever happened. It is truly March Madness this year.
It like, Andy, you're so right. And not only just the two remaining one seeds, it's like number one overall and number two overall.
Yeah, right.
In quick succession, as you were talking about. Like, it was so weird to be watching both of these and be like, oh, Bama's down at the half.
Yeah.
Oh, Houston's down at the half.
Right.
Is this going to keep happening? Oh, wait, let me look at my notes. Yeah, we've never had an Elite Eight with without a one seed. I better type this. Like, it was just like my brain kept moving the narrative forward, and it was so weird. Andy, we're going to talk about both these games. Obviously, we're going to talk about the other stuff, the wildness of it. Let's talk about Bama first, because they're the number one overall seed. They have the best freshman, or at least the most productive freshman. The freshman we now believe will be the highest picked in the NBA draft. But Andy, he hadn't done it in the NCAA tournament, and that's Brandon Miller. Tonight, or on Friday night and tournament wide, Brandon Miller hasn't been there. And I think consequently, Alabama loses 71-64 to San Diego State. And Andy, if you're with me, I think it was like, it wasn't that close, right? Like, Bama just kind of made a little push at the end there. Maybe it's Brandon Miller's injury that he was dealing with. I don't know. But in this particular game, 9 points on 3 of 19 shooting, 1 of 10 from deep. Like, Andy, what's going on with this man?
Yeah, Brandon Miller was straight up awful in the NCAA tournament. There's absolutely no other way to put it. And he had the groin injury, and we'll probably never know exactly how much that was impacting him. It didn't appear that he was moving noticeably different, but groin injuries can be, they don't go away very quickly. So the odds of him playing through pain are very high. He almost certainly was. But Isaac, this was one of the worst NCAA tournaments from an individual player that we have ever seen. And that's not anecdotal. That's not hyperbole. That is a fact. Brandon Miller is the only player since 1960 to shoot under 20% in a single NCAA tournament with more than 40 attempts.
Wow.
Brandon Miller shot 19.5% from the field in this NCAA tournament in 3 games. He shot 15.8% from 3. He had 10 turnovers and 6 assists. He didn't do anything all that well. His shot was not falling. He was not distributing the ball well. He was turning it over. Like, he didn't have it. And again, how much of it was impacted by the injury? How much of it was impacted by teams suddenly figuring out how to defend him? I have a hard time imagining that that's what it was necessarily. I don't think he was particularly. There wasn't anything about his game that you could just suddenly figure out. He's that good. He's that dynamic. There's a reason he's drawn these Paul George comparisons. He's an absolute star.
Yep.
And he just didn't play like it at all. Well, and it was devastating for Alabama.
And fairly or unfairly, there have been a lot of Jabari Smith comparisons this year. I think because they both played for SEC schools in Alabama, whatever. Jabari Smith kind of had this downturn towards the end of like the regular season and into the SEC tournament. Brandon Miller didn't really have that, right? Like, until that goose egg last weekend, scored in double digits every game of this season, except the one game against Houston where he had 8.
Yeah.
So it's caused me to start to wondering, did he have that downturn now? Like, was this the moment it hit him? I don't know, but it's like, it's weird, man, because we just haven't seen it from him.
When we see freshmen struggle, like that's not that uncommon to see freshmen hit a wall late in the season. It's just, this was if that's what this was, wow, he hit it hard. He hit it harder than most people do.
Yeah. Well, and you wonder about the mental space of like, is all the news and all the attention, is it catching up at some point? Well, Andy, one of the other issues is that we've raved about how Javon Quinterly has been playing in leading the team and how important he was to their success. At the same time as Brandon Miller's not having a good game, Quinterly goes 4 of 13 from the field. And when you have your lead guard and your absolute stud do that, you're not going to win. But let's not just make this all about Alabama. Let's talk about the team that went out and beat them, getting the Mountain West to their first ever Elite 8 appearance is San Diego State. Great job by them. And Andy, tell us about Mr. Trammell. He had himself a night.
Darian Trammell, that's my guy. For those of you who have been with us from the very beginning of the podcast, this was probably, might have been our second episode. I think it honestly was our second episode. We did bold predictions for the upcoming season. My bold prediction on November 8th of the season was that Darian Trammell would be a All-American point guard for San Diego State. That did not happen, and I'm not going to take a victory lap on that because it did not happen. But compared to my other prediction, which was about Pelle Larsson for Arizona, who really wasn't all that good this year, I'm going to feel a lot better about what happened with Darian Trammell because he went out, he had 21 points on 9 of 16 shooting, knocked down 3 out of his 5 threes. The rest of the team didn't shoot very well at all. Trammell carried this team to victory. Seattle U transfer, a really fun story I saw about him after this game is that when he entered the transfer portal and when he was being recruited, the San Diego State coaching staff told him, with you on our team, we will be an Elite 8 team. And that was how they sold him. And then he did it. He made it happen against Alabama. A really fun story for the Mountain West, for San Diego State, a team that's never beaten a number 1 seed before, that hasn't made it to the Elite 8, for them to pull off. Most people, myself included, I will happily admit this, most people thought they'd lose to Charleston. Most people didn't expect them to even advance in the first round. The Mountain West has this tremendous history of not performing well in March. And we already saw Utah State had lost. Nevada got smacked by Arizona State. And it was kind of like, okay, it's going to be another one of those years for the Mountain West, and San Diego State's going to go down. And instead, they beat Charleston. They continue to advance. They beat Furman. And here they are taking down the number 1 overall seed. Really, really good story for the Aztecs.
It is. And Andy, by the way, I looked it up while you're talking. That was our second ever show, the bold prediction. So we need to go back and reevaluate those this offseason and see how we did. Anyway, San Diego State led at the half, 28-23. And you just wondered, would Alabama go on a run? And they did. They got to the point where they were up 9 with 11:30 left. And so I was like, oh boy, danger time for San Diego State. And I tweeted that out. Perfect timing, because then the Aztecs go on a 12-0 run to get a lead at 51-48. The run extends to 23-5, and the game's over at that point. So, folks, if you're ever wanting to turn around something in your life, just ask me to tweet about just, hey, Isaac, can I pay you $10 to tweet about how I'm in a danger zone right now, and then everything's going to turn around for my life. So I'm your guy if you need that in your life. But Andy, one of the other things, going back to the Alabama side of it really quick, is there's always this thing with them where, because they bomb away from 3 so much, if they just have not just an average night, but a really, really bad night, they're in trouble. And that's what happened. 3 of 27 for Nate Oates' club. Well, Andy, there's obviously a ton more we could say about this. Alabama's gone, number 1 overall team. Congrats to San Diego State. Moving on, where they will play the Blue Jays of Creighton, Greg McDermott's team, making it to the Elite 8. And what a way to bring it all together. We got to talk about Princeton, and we will here in just a sec very quickly. But for Creighton, who started the season in the top 10, had that 6-game losing streak, Kalkbrenner's injury and mono, and we started looking at it like, will they be able to turn this back around? Here they are, one of the final 8 teams in the land. Congrats to Creighton and the Blue Jays. And Andy, listen, Baylor Scheierman, massive
Mm-hmm.
night, phenomenal. 21 points on 8 of 11 shooting, 9 boards, 4 assists, 5 of 7 from 3. Ryan Kalkbrenner, you love that turnaround from mono to scoring 22 on 9 of 12 shooting in the Sweet 16. Great stuff there. But what I want to make sure to say is Princeton.
Yeah.
Respect on their name, man. Like to get here to be just like 3 straight years of having a 15 seed into the second weekend is or having a 15 seed, win a game over a 2 seed, and for the second year in a row having one get here. Pretty cool stuff. Congrats to them. And they hung around for most of the first half and even had a lead into the latter part of the first half, and then there was just too much Creighton. What were a couple of your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, Creighton was just overwhelmed them in the second half. That's really all it was. I think Princeton was only down 4 at halftime. I believe it was a 47-43. It was a really high octane, high scoring game between two teams that could not miss. And it wasn't even bad defense on either side, really. It was just shot maker after shot maker after shot maker. In the second half, Princeton attempted a 1-3-1 defense, which worked, and it slowed Creighton down a little bit. They got less shots off, but then they crashed the board really well, and then it kind of ended up clearing out from them. So again, shout out to Princeton. They played really well. This was a fun season for them. I hope to see them continue to have a lot of success. The last note that I wanted to make on this kind of a fun little story is that there's 2 brothers who are now going to face each other in the Elite Eight. Creighton's Arthur Kaluma taking on San Diego State's Adam Seiko. Those 2 guys are brothers, and they get to face each other in the Elite Eight.
Crazy.
That's always fun, right?
Great stuff there. Love to see it. That just some of the fun stories like that the tournament always brings about. Like we go back to Villanova in North Carolina with Chris Jenkins and Nate Britt connection. Cool stuff there. Andy, we already talked about it, but while Bama was in the midst of losing to San Diego State, the Houston Cougars were doing the exact same thing at the hands of Jim Laranaga's Miami Hurricanes. And now the Canes have gone to back-to-back Elite Eights, the lone ACC school standing. But Andy, I don't think, and you don't think, that these Hurricanes are getting enough love as a national title contender. Let's talk about that in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is not only heating up, but it is on fire.
Yes.
And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app because it's safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. And you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores, 3-pointers drained. Make sure you check out all the lines for Saturday and Sunday's Elite Eight games. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So, folks, don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Once again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn all about it. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Speaking of which, Andy, Houston, Miami, the Hurricanes were down 7.5 on the line at FanDuel. I say that terribly. Houston was favored by 7.5 at FanDuel. And the Hurricanes end up winning 89-75. And I just got to say, Andy, I don't offer betting advice very often, but we've talked about it, you and I have. And I even went so far as to be bold enough to tweet it out on Friday before the game. This line was just way too big for way too big for what this matchup entailed. Not only that, I thought that Miami would win straight up. Like from the second we started looking at these matchups, I have had Houston in my Elite Eight, 3, 2, 1, go. I have had Miami in my Elite Eight knocking off Houston because of what Miami has and does. This team is absolutely legit. This team has everything you need to be able to contend for, at the very least, a national championship. They've got elite backcourt play with Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong. They've got Jordan Miller on the wing. They've got Norchad Omier in the paint and a whole host of guys to help fill out the rotation that all contributed in big ways to this game as well. And Andy, 89 points for Miami. The most points Houston gave up all season long. And of course, it has to happen in this moment. You hate it for the Cougars, who have just been on this trajectory forward. Thought Marcus Sasser looked a lot more like himself in this game. We were looking for fun matchups everywhere. We got them, but it's just too much Miami.
They needed a couple more wins to get to play in Houston. Then they would have played in Houston for the Final Four, would have had a home court advantage, home crowd advantage for the Cougs, and they just could not quite get there. And look,
with Jim Nance on the call, by the way, for his last time for his alma mater.
Yes, that's right. That was very cool. That was a very cool moment. Miami hung 89. They hung 89 on Houston. That is
round
insane.
Up. Give it 90. Yeah, I'm for that.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard it is to score 90 points on Houston? Like, this is an elite defensive team, and Miami went out and just torched them. And Miami's not a good defensive team. They struggle on that end of the floor. I mean, quite honestly, Houston doesn't score 75 points all that often. The fact that they even got there is kind of a testament that Miami's maybe not so great on that end of the floor, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You score 89 points, you're going to win every single game you play in this NCAA tournament. I adamantly believe that. Maybe you only win by one against Gonzaga because they're going to score 80 something against you. But if Miami and I'll tell you this right now, if Miami's going to score 89 on Houston, they're going to score a lot more against Gonzaga because that defense is not good for Mark Few's team. Nigel Pack was
just a fun game, by the way.
It'd be a really fun game. It'd be a really fun game. And if Texas didn't do what Texas did to Xavier, I think we might be seeing that game. We'll talk about that momentarily. But Nigel Pack, Isaiah Wong combined for 46 points in this one. Just phenomenal outside shooting from those guys. Phenomenal outside shooting from Pack. Isaiah Wong doesn't do as much from three, but attacked the rim effortlessly. Really, really good. Miami shot 52% from the field, 44% from three, 84% from the free throw line. Basically, everything was going down. Everything was going down for them. To do that against Houston is absolutely ridiculous. The Cougs cut the lead down to 2 in the second half. It was 51-49 at one point. The Canes responded with an 11-4 run. 3 of those were threes from Nigel Pack. They had a 62-53 lead. Timeout was called. They came out and extended the lead by 7 more points after that, 70-53, and that pretty much did it for the Cougs. Really great season for Kelvin Sampson's squad, but Jim Laranaga's crew back in the Elite Eight, an incredible stretch of games for Miami. Really, really nice to see them continuing to succeed.
And man, I even thought Norchad Omier was hobbled a little bit again, like early in the first half. And the commentators were, Jim Nance was mentioning it like, hey, it looks like Omier's a little bit, maybe that ankle's getting back to him from what he suffered against Duke. I think Grant Hill was hexing him, getting his from the Blue Devil. Anyway, but man, Omier 12 and 13 against Houston's front court is just. And keep in mind, this dude is like 6'7", I think. Omier, like it's just ridiculous what he carves out for himself there. I'm like, 6'7", 248. I mean, come on with that noise. You love it. And like it hurts for Marcus Sasser. It hurts for Jamal Shed. These dudes came back to get beyond to this point. Yeah. And I just like. That's where the basketball fan in me, like I love what we get to cover, but that's the agony and the ecstasy.
It's heartbreaking.
It's just like you want all these young men to be able to experience the glory of it. And it's just like you hate it for him. For Jarris Walker, man, like what? This dude, he's just fun to watch play basketball, Andy. Like you forget the media role that we play sometimes. It's just like, look what he's out here doing. He finishes his final collegiate game, not an efficient game, 4 of 16 from the field, 16 points, but 2 of 6 from 3, 6 of 6 from the free throw line, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, and 4 blocks, and Andy, 0 turnovers. Wow. That is a stat line for a massive dude who's going to immediately go to the NBA. Went ahead and said that post game at his locker. But I mean, you got a 6'8", 240 guy saying like putting up that stat line. You love it. And so, Andy, we're gonna have a matchup between Miami and Texas because the Horns knock off Xavier, and it was. The final score tells me it was only by 12, but
wasn't even close.
No,
not even close.
Not even. This was a 20-point game the entire second half, and they did it without Dylan DeSue. Andy, the team learned before the game started. He tried to give it a couple runs up and down the floor. He couldn't keep going. Winds up in a boot on the sideline. But Andy, what does it say about just the sheer depth of what Rodney Terry's club has, that they're able to take away the guy that's been their most productive player throughout this tournament so far and just go beat the snot out of Xavier on Friday night?
Tells me two things. One thing is that the Horns need to hire Rodney Terry. And we've talked about this at length on the show, and everybody else is talking about it too. I understand not making the announcement in the middle of the NCAA tournament, but as soon as it's done, as soon as Texas is done, which the way they're playing right now might not be till the very last day of the season, I think you got to make the announcement. I know people say, oh, like he inherited the roster, whatever. To do this, to lead them to a Big 12 championship is insane. To be in the Elite Eight is insane. To potentially be in the Final Four, which they got a real good shot. And then you look at the way that they handled this, the Dylan Dessou situation. He's out. He's averaging 23.5 points and 10 boards in the NCAA tournament. He was playing the best basketball of his career, and it wasn't close. And they lose him. They bring Christian Bishop in. He fills in. And guess what he does? He puts up 14 points with 5 boards. He shoots 6 of 7 from the field.
So ridiculous.
Xavier's not a great defensive team, but to have your backup post come in allegedly unexpectedly, we don't know how much of a sense they had about Dessou's health going into the game, but Bishop came in, filled in that role, had a monstrous game. Texas is playing elite basketball right now. One of the biggest knocks about this Texas team coming into the tournament throughout the season has been their outside shooting. Isaac, they have played 3 games in the NCAA tournament. In 2 of those games, they have shot higher than 55% from 3. We can pretend the other one didn't happen. Certainly Longhorns fans would like to, because they shot less than 10% in that game. And I think that kind of indicates the highs and lows of this team. They are a inconsistent outside shooting team. They have elite guard play. Marcus Carr was incredible in this game. Of course, Sir'Jabari Rice has been awesome throughout the tournament. Tyrese Hunter has been great. This is a very, very good backcourt for Texas. It's just not a very consistent outside shooting backcourt, and that's why Dylan Dessou was and is so valuable to them. But when he doesn't play, it just doesn't even matter, which is crazy. That's how Texas is the highest seeded team that's left. In theory, they're probably the favorite to win it all from this point forward. And the way that they're playing right now, it is hard to not think that, Miami and Texas are 2 of the hottest teams right now, and that's going to be an insanely fun basketball game that we're going to see between those 2 teams. But Texas, when they're hitting threes like this, when they're able to replace their starting center and bring somebody off the bench who has a similar level of production, it's hard to imagine anybody beating them.
Yeah, I'm just reading. I saw that apparently Rodney Terry has updated things. I'm just trying to scan quickly. It looks like he's got a bone bruise is what we're learning about Dylan Dessou. And Coach Terry says he said, quote, "It will be day to day right now. He got injured in the last ball game. We immediately started trying to work on treatment and trying to see what we could do to put him in the best position. We'll put him out there if he's 100%, but we're not going to put a young man who has a great future ahead of him out on the floor if he's not ready to be there." While Terry didn't rule Dessou out for Sunday's game, he'll need to shed the walking boot and feel 100% if he wants to play against Miami. So that's just where we're at in real time as of 1:17 a.m. Eastern on what's actually technically Saturday. So as of right now, I don't think we should expect to see Dessou against Miami on Sunday. And the hope is, for Texas at least, that they can win against Miami. That's going to be another awesome game, man. Great game in the Midwest region final. And then if they're lucky enough to get to Houston, which would be awesome because it's so close to Austin there, they can get there. And then whether it's UConn or Gonzaga, goodness, that we're going to talk about the right side of the bracket in a minute, but there's the most recent update on Dessou.
Well, Isaac, let's talk about the right side of the bracket, because the right side of the bracket, the left side of the bracket, very, very different. We have no number 1 teams left. We only have 1-2 seed who's left. We have no head coaches who have ever won a championship. We have an absolutely insane group of teams remaining. Let's discuss. But first, today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Built Bar, and the Built Bar March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now is your time to make it count. So go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'm going to vote for the Churro Bar. I know Isaac's going to vote for the Churro Bar as well. And if you want your favorite team or bar to win, then you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar or puff. And when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door.
Oof.
You have got to try Built, the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they are so amazing. You will not think they're good for you. What makes them so good? Well, for starters, they are high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. So go to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. Built Bar, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. All right, Isaac, we've kind of litigated this already in the show, the insane group of teams that we have left in the Elite Eight. No number one seeds is the obvious headliner, and it is a spectacular headliner when you look at the group of teams that we had this year. Some of the high-profile 2 seeds are already out the door. Arizona and UCLA, of course, are gone as the Pac-12 continues their drought of not having any teams winning a championship. Marquette is obviously out the door. Texas still remains. This is a really, really fun group. And in a season full of parity, in a season where North Carolina didn't make the NCAA tournament as the number 1 preseason seed, and a season where Purdue was unranked to begin the year, where UConn, I think, was unranked, or at least they were very low in the rankings to begin the year. Marquette was finished 9th in the Big East. Kansas State was picked to finish last in the Big 12, I believe. Like, this has been a season of parity. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of factors for that. Certainly the NIL and transfer portal has changed the way that college coaches build their rosters, and you can turn things around a lot quicker. And we have seen that with a lot of these programs. But at the end of the day, I want to talk about the 8 teams that we have sitting here left, because it's a really, really fun group.
Yeah, Andy, it was funny. I hadn't really processed it too much, other than I had started to think about Alabama's got a pretty, not easy, but favorable path straight to the national championship game at this point. And then I'm like, oh, wait, Alabama's about to lose. Let me look into what's happening on the left side of the bracket. And at that point, it was Kansas State, San Diego State, FAU, and then either Creighton or Princeton. Right. And I was like, one of those 5 teams will be in the national championship game. Like, wrap your brain around that. Like, think of all the national brands, all the blue bloods, everyone we thought was killing it this year. And it's like, it's going to be Kansas State, San Diego State, Creighton, or FAU. Obviously, Creighton beat Princeton, so it's down to those 4. But I would have laughed in your face, Andy Patton, if preseason you had told me, hey, one of these 4 teams is playing on the last Monday night. I would have been like, okay, whatever. You look at that, and then you look at the right side of the bracket, and still not, as you said, no 1 seeds, and we're missing one of the 2 seeds. But it's Texas, Gonzaga, UConn, and Miami.
Such a great group of teams.
Goodness gracious. And so just it's like I started humming to myself, one of these things is not like the other. Like, I mean, just seriously, whoever it, like, I live in Missouri, and they divide the state for football. And it's like the teams on the west side, it's always going to be whoever comes out of that semifinal obliterates the east side. And it feels, with all due respect to the left side of the bracket, it feels like whoever comes out of this right side gauntlet is going to be our national champion this year. Of course, the way this whole thing has gone, they're going to get blown out. And
that's what I was about to say.
Yeah. And so and not to mention, it's like left side versus right side for who's got the biggest foot storyline going on between Marquise Noel on the left side and Dylan Dessou on the right side. So Andy, wild here. But when you look at these teams, as you talked about, what about the coaches going on? Because that's some interesting stuff too.
Yeah, we don't have any coaches who've ever won a national championship who are remaining. We only have a few coaches who have gone to a Final Four. Of course, Mark Few has. Jim Larrañaga did at George Mason. I believe those are the only 2 head coaches. Those are the only 2 coaches who have gone to a Final Four as a head coach. Obviously, Jerome Tang as an assistant, et cetera, et cetera. But for head coaches in a Final Four, we're down to 2. For head coaches who've won a national championship, we are down to 0.
We're going to have a virgin.
We're going to have a new coach winning a national championship. Awesome. And that is so
love it.
And it's so exciting to see somebody get that opportunity. I think most of the coaches here kind of aren't under a lot of pressure. I think it's like, it's gravy at this point. Anything they do, certainly for Rodney Terry, Jerome Tang, like brand new coaches in their position. I think that, you feel pretty good even just being here. And if they advance and win a championship, that's fantastic. Mark Few is probably the coach under the biggest amount of pressure, as he feels that basically every single year because of how long it has been, despite the fact that they started from nothing and arrived here in this very enviable position of being a routine appearer in the Sweet 16. For Mark Few, the fact that they already upset somebody, I think puts them in a better spot. They've already kind of advanced as far as you would expect them to, but the pressure is definitely going to be on for them to potentially advance farther, at least make it to that championship game. But it's fun to be in a situation where we're, as much as the blue blood coaches are entertainment, we always like watching John Calipari and Tom Izzo and what they do on the sidelines. It's fun that we're going to see somebody new hoisting a trophy at the end of the year.
Man, I'm really excited for that, and it's just good because it gets more people into the elite hierarchy of this whole thing. And Andy, like we talk about, like it seems kind of weird, like, oh my word, this group of teams, the national champion will come from it. But let's keep in mind, folks, when you look at KenPom, all 8 of these teams are top 26 at KenPom. There are no shocks. There are no surprises. 7 of the 8 are in the top 20 at KenPom. Only Miami is outside of it. And so FAU,
can you talk about the fact that Miami is the lowest rated team in KenPom? That's insane to me.
And that's because their defensive efficiency is outside the top 100. And so FAU, top 20, San Diego State, top 20. Like, there are no surprises. These are all high-level basketball teams. And I know Johnny Q basketball fan isn't going to get that, or Johnny Q sports fan who's tuning in for the Elite Eight and Final Four. But, like, for those of us in the know, man, these are great elite teams. And so, Andy, keep in mind, though, of these 8, we know it's going to be one of these 4. It will either be, I'm looking at things backwards. I'll tell you who will not win the national champion. Let me put it that way. Gonzaga, Miami, Florida Atlantic, or K-State. And the reason for that is this. No team has ever been the national champion with a defense ranked outside the top 22 at KenPom. So if I'm looking at it correctly, it could be San Diego State. It could be Creighton. It could be Texas, or it could be UConn. Your national champion will be one of those 4. And so it'll be really interesting to see on that. Well, Andy, fun stuff there. All the teams are 3-point numbers. The below 32.9% you're not going to win. Those teams have all been eliminated. All 8 teams left are above that threshold. So they're all good there. It's just about 4 of the 8 teams do not have that top 22 KenPom defensive efficiency. And so sorry about you, but you're not going to win this whole thing. Well, Andy, Saturday, today, Elite 8 games. We got 2 of them. Kansas State, FAU, tipping off at 6:09 Eastern on TBS, followed by Gonzaga, UConn at 8:49 Eastern, also on TBS. Wow, we're going to punch 2 Final Four tickets later today. Cannot wait to see it. Folks, we'll be with you again on Sunday. Please tune in. We'll recap both of these games and then continue to look forward. Please give us a review on iTunes. Subscribe to the show. Thank goodness we moved off of 666 earlier in the day from our YouTube subscriptions. Please smash the like button, comment on the show. As always, apologies to the lawyer family, and until tomorrow, peace.